Hey guys, Tom Barclay here. After a bit of a busy, hectic 24 hours or so, I'm doing this video back at home, having been to Ange Postecoglou's pre-Fulham press conference today, which didn't come too much later than by the time I got home from the Roma game last night. Thanks, M25 being shut did not help. But such as the quick turnaround at this stage of the season between games and press conferences, it just feels like a pretty much go period of the season. But it's all good fun, of course. Before we get into Ange's press conference, I just wanted to talk a little bit about Dejan Kulusevski, because we spoke to him in the mix zone, which is the area where journalists get to speak or hope to speak to players after games. And Decky, to be fair, compared to most of the squad, he's probably the most likely player, along with Sonny, to come and speak to us afterwards. Often, players are brought out by the club to speak to us, but sometimes we can just flag them down as they come past, and it's up to them whether they want to talk to us or not. But Decky's often one who will chat, and he was interesting last night. Seemed frustrated that they hadn't won the game, obviously, from that last minute goal, but he talked a bit about the form that he's in and how he's playing and how much he wants Tottenham to be number one, was the phrase he used. He really will stop at nothing to get Spurs to where he sees that they can potentially be and where he wants them to be, which will be music to all Spurs fans' ears. But one thing I specifically asked him about, there were some interesting statistics that came out, I think, from the Premier League website a few days ago, about the amount of distance covered by players in the league, and Decky was third in the whole league, behind Bruno Guimaraes of Newcastle and Lewis Cook of Bournemouth, on about 130.4 kilometres, I think it was. But crucially, he'd actually played fewer minutes than both of those players. So Bruno was on about 134. I think Lewis Cook was about 130.8, so just ahead of Decky. But they both played over 1,000 minutes. Kulusevski's only 950. So when you work it out, sort of minute per kilometre, I suppose, he's probably top of the lot. And it comes as no surprise, really, when you watch him, like all fans do, and as I am very lucky to do on a weekly basis. Just the incredible amount of work he puts in is just fantastic, and good to see it reflected in the numbers. So we asked him a bit about that, and I asked him specifically, given how much he puts into every game, in which he, first of all, he talked about the fact that he wants to leave nothing behind. He wants to leave it all out there. He only gets one life, one career, he says, or he said, and that's why he puts so much energy into trying to make Tottenham as good as they can be through his performances. But I asked him, with that in mind and the physical demands that come with the Premier League and all the matches that top teams like Spurs have at the moment, how does he get his body right to be able to adapt to that? And he said he does a lot. He eats right, he drinks right, a lot. He drinks a lot, he sleeps a lot. But he also interestingly mentioned that he doesn't spend much time on his phone. Now, obviously, this is a modern era where people do spend a lot of time on their phones these days. I'm as guilty as anyone. I'm filming this literally on my phone right now. But we all can be guilty of that. But it's interesting to hear that. I was not expecting that particular response. But it's clearly something that he believes in is a big part of his success and his energy in games and being fully recovered. He talks a lot about recovery being crucial to his energy on the pitch, and I just find that quite interesting, to be honest. He also talked about Fraser Forster and backing him, as you'd expect all Forster's teammates to do at this point. But they've got full. He says that the Kulusevski, that is, says the squad have full faith in Forster, who I think, to be fair, against Roma, yeah, he still had moments, passing out from the back. I remember one wayward pass in the second half, but from a shot-stopping point of view, which, to be fair, I don't think anyone really fully, that was one of his biggest strengths. I thought he played very well on that front. He made a couple of great saves, and it was a shame that they did end up conceding right in the last minute, because before then, it felt like those couple of saves just before the goal went in were going to be the story of the match, given the situation with the goalkeepers at the moment, the kind of scrutiny on Forster and whether he's going to be up to it in Vicario's absence. But yeah, I thought he was good. So on to Ange's press conference, and it's probably fitting to start with his comments on Kulusevski, because they link into what Decky himself was talking about in these statistics, these running stats that I was mentioning. And he was asked by my good friend Dan Kilpatrick of the Standard about this stamina that comes with Decky and where he thinks Ange this is, where he thinks it comes from. And Ange said it's no fluke. Yes, there might be some sort of genetics part to it, that Kulusevski perhaps has just been born with this ability to run all day to a certain extent. But he talked about the work he puts into it, the elite recovery rates and the mental strength that come with Kulusevski as a player who can just keep going and going. And he says he's not a biochemist, I think it was, but he has observed that his running efficiency, Kulusevski is, how efficient he is in the way he runs, is pretty top notch and is a big part of why he's so good at this. Now, I would love to know probably how to run a bit more efficiently. I'm sure all of us would, like Kulusevski does. It would definitely help me on my grassroots sort of Sunday league football, if I could learn how to run a bit more efficiently. But apparently that's what Ange seems to think that is one of Kulusevski's big strengths when it comes to his physical performances, is the way he's efficient in the way he runs, and in that efficiency, he doesn't seem to use up too much energy in the way he runs, which I thought was quite a bit of interesting detail from Postecoglou into why he thinks that Kulusevski is the Duracell bunny of the Spurs team that he is. He says he's mindful of not overworking him, so I think you will see, where possible, he will look to rotate like he has done with all his key players and all his players, to be honest, when he's been able to. Just unfortunately at the moment, due to injuries, it's making it more difficult to do that. But he also talked about his mentality and that sort of laser focus that Kulusevski has to getting to the top, how ambitious he is as a player. And I think that sort of opens the door slightly to a wider conversation about Kulusevski. I mean, how his performances this season have been outstanding consistently. He's definitely been Spurs' best player. And you could argue, and Spurs fans won't like this, but if he keeps playing as consistently well as this, and it's not just the energy, although that was obviously one of his biggest strengths, it's his end product, as we saw against Roma, the way he set up Brennan Johnson, as we saw against Man City for that goal for Maddison to start off with, and in numerous other games this season. You do wonder where, is he getting to the point where if he keeps putting this together, will some of Europe's sort of top elite clubs start looking at him, because his age profile's good. He's got all you want from a modern player, from a work rate point of view, and now seems to be showing that kind of end product as well, which is reaching this sort of elite stage. I think we're quite a way at the moment still from having that kind of consistency or seeing it over a longer spell. But the good thing from Tottenham's point of view is that he's tied up to a contract for quite a long time, and if they can keep improving and finally get that consistency that has been bugging all kinds of Spurs fans and is a huge part of this whole Postecoglou conversation, then he can be the driving force. But I do wonder if other clubs are going to start taking notice. There's a wider conversation to see to follow, I suppose, over the coming months, to see if Kulusevski still keeps hitting these heights. Not that any fan out there is going to be enjoying watching this part of the video talk with the suggestion that they could lose one of their best players, and as we've known in the past, even if that were the case, that bigger clubs would start to look at him. Spurs have always it's never been an easy club to sign players from. So one to watch, I suppose. Just finally on Kulusevski, on that phone comment from Kulusevski, it was put to Ange, about that, and he's kind of reticent, I think, sometimes as to come across as the sort of grouchy older man who sort of complains about modern life and the way people behave these days. So he's very much saying, he was at pains to sort of suggest that he would suggest to any younger player or any younger person to give up a phone or to stop using it as much, because he knows how much it's a way of life now for people. But he just turned it back on himself in quite an amusing way and spoke about the fact that He himself has about 3 contacts on his phone and never gets any messages, never has any calls, and it's just absolute bliss. I find that very hard to believe as a Premier League manager. I'm sure he has about 1 million contacts on his phone and he's bothered quite a lot, but it was still a funny line nonetheless. So on to the next sort of aspect of Ange's press conference. I think the next line is probably the question about entertainment. So the final question in his press conference after Roma in the post-match seemed to irk a few fans about him being asked about entertainment versus winning, and how some might argue if he'd played a more pragmatic approach in the final few minutes, perhaps they would have seen out the win. And he sort of doubled down and said, I always want my team to be entertaining. It's just who I am. It was pretty much the same kind of thing today. He sort of saw the question coming. He's heard it many, many times throughout this time. He reiterated that's just what it's about for him. And he made a sort of joke, to be honest, about how people will be. You can talk about pragmatism, but it's not the way I want to do it. And you might be sad when I'm gone, when it's the entertainment sort of that kind of approach is over, and maybe you've had your fill of whoever the next guy is if he comes in with a pragmatic approach. And he said that at times during that Roma game for 20 minutes, particularly in this first half, he was I thought it was some of the best football they played, and he really just couldn't score that third goal, which would have really killed the tie off. I kind of agree, I suppose, with the assessment of the match. I mean, Tottenham definitely had their chances, and it's through his approach that those chances are created. So you can't have one without the other. But as I've sort of said at times, I do think there's perhaps a bit of a happy medium. I mean, who is it for me to say compared to a manager who's won so many things and has managed to get to the point of being the Tottenham manager? But there are times when you do think perhaps they could mix it up a little bit, as they have done, I think, against Man City at times. But it seems Ange doesn't want to go that way. Still wants to stick with that approach. And in fact, he even referenced the Man City game when they were 2-0 up. He said, if we'd gone pragmatic, we wouldn't have gone on to score those next couple of goals, which have led to one of the most historic victories in the club's Premier League history. Which I suppose is an argument that is a fair one. It's up to Tottenham fans really to agree with him and whether they think this approach will pay off long term. But what is for sure, whatever you think about it, he's not going to be changing, and I suppose you have to respect him for it. And that's pretty much it on that front. Sort of next point I thought was quite interesting was he talking about injuries. So first of all, for the Fulham game, no one's really expected back apart from potentially Romero, but even that seems a bit unlikely. So he's obviously had this toe injury. Ange talked about how they're going to give him as much time as possible, and there is a possibility, but he seemed like a slim one. Van der Ven, as we know, is out till mid-December. Richarlison not till the new year. Odobert, Vicario, these are all long-term injuries. And Mikey Moore as well wasn't really mentioned, but it sounds like he's still a while away. And because of that injury situation, it led to 4 kids effectively being on the bench against Roma, including 2 who actually went to school today. So I'm recording this on a Friday, like I say, after the press conference. So Malachi Hardy and Luca Barnett-Williams are both 16. Luca only turned 16, I think, in October. So he's literally, I think, in GCSE year. They both on the bench. They didn't come off the bench because obviously circumstances wouldn't have really suggested that they would get an appearance, but they were on the bench, and then today they were back in school, which must have made for some interesting conversations and quite a humble brag, you'd imagine, in the playground or in the school cafeteria, I suppose, after a moment like that. Imagine being 16 and being on the bench against Roma and then being at school the next day. But it was sort of underlining what Postecoglou was saying about the injuries they've got at the moment, that they've had to turn to some youngsters a lot on the bench at the moment, which led to the obvious kind of follow-up question about January and transfer business and whether any of this makes a difference really. And his answer was, first of all, he said he had plenty of conversations with or meetings with technical director Johan Lange regarding January. They've got their sort of ideas in place, but it's really much a see where they're at squad-wise by then, because when you think about it at the moment, apart from the long-term ones, I mean, Romero and Van der Ven should be back by then. So there's less of a need to dip into the market on that front. Other players should be returning not too far away as well. Like I say, Richarlison hopefully back in January. So it's kind of seeing where they're at and if they've had any more injuries at that point, whether they go and have to feel like they have to go into the market and do something else. And the same, I suppose, can be said for goalkeeper regarding how Forster gets on, where Vicario is at in his recovery, if they see a deal that they want to do, because they will be looking at another goalkeeper long term because of Forster's age and contract situation. So, kind of what you'd expect on the transfers. There were a few other sort of topics, such as Brennan Johnson. Obviously, that's 9 goals in 19 games this season. He was asked about him in particular and what's clicked, I suppose, when it comes to his finishing. And he says, there's confidence as part of it. A lot of it is about discipline of getting into the particular positions that he wants him to, because the way Spurs play are very, very specific. And that right winger position, as Postecoglou said, if he was playing it, he would have loved to have been a right winger in his teams because they would score plenty of goals, and that's what we're starting to see with Johnson. He also talked briefly about Gray as well, and just kind of highlighting what a start he's had to his career so far, and how he's played so well, I suppose, that people are forgetting that he's still only 18, which, another solid performance at fullback, I thought, from Archie Gray. So just finally looking ahead to the Fulham game, I mean, now I think we've all definitely learnt to not count any chickens at all when it comes to Spurs. Whoever they're playing, home or away, you're just not quite sure what's going to happen. I guess there's the rub, I suppose, when it comes to Ange's whole approach and where you're at with it, I guess. But, you could easily see them winning quite comfortably. Obviously, Fulham lost 4-1 at home last time out. I think Marco Silva's done a great job at Fulham. He's someone that I remember doing the press conference on Zoom when Silva got the job, when Parker had left and Fulham had got relegated back to the Championship. And you thought, Marco Silva, that's an interesting choice from Fulham. Didn't really seem to work out at Everton. But Fulham at the time, to be fair, because I was covering them quite a lot, behind the scenes, they were very sure they got the right man. And he's done an unbelievable job when you think about it. They won the Championship at Cantor, coming first. I mean, yes, they would have been one of the favourites, but it's never that easy when you're coming down from relegation. Had a big churn of players, then got promoted, then had a couple of mid-table finishes. Along the way, they've lost key players like Mitrovic, who was his goal scorer. João Paulinho is a fantastic defensive midfielder who, someone like Spurs could really do with. He's gone to Bayern Munich, and others. Tosin Adarabioyo has gone to Chelsea. More players like that. And he just keeps replacing them, and if anything, they look better than ever now. He's managed to get a tune out of Raul Jimenez and Adama Traore again. Emil Smith-Rowe's come in and has looked dangerous. So there are plenty of good players and plenty of threat from Spurs. They're a solid Premier League outfit and a fine manager, and Postecoglou talked about Silva in particular. But again, if Spurs want to achieve anything this season, a home game like this is the ones where they've got to be winning. And as people sort of said after the dust had settled from that 4-0 amazing win at City, it's not like it counts for nothing if they don't go and beat Fulham, but it's hard to get really excited about Tottenham's real, long-term prospects if they can't bring some consistency and follow up a win like that with another solid win over a team like Fulham at home. And it kind of comes back to what I was saying a few weeks ago about making Spurs a serious side. Are they one of those teams that just on their day are fantastic, but you can't really have much faith in them achieving something major long term? Or is it just part of their process to becoming one of those serious sides who really do start to challenge regularly for major honours? And this is kind of the first little test of that since that amazing win at City. Team-wise, I think a lot of it is to be expected. So I've been picked up on saying the back four picks itself, even though I think often it does. But yeah, Forster obviously in goal, Porro and Odegaard fullbacks. I think Dragusin and Davis, you just got to expect Romero's not going to quite be fit, but you never know. He has opened the door on that one. Basuma, who's become obviously key with Bentancur being suspended, hold midfielder. I wouldn't be surprised if it was Maddison and Sarr, just because Maddison and Kulusevski against some of the other games, I think maybe that's been a bit too much creativity, but I feel like you need to get Maddison back into the team after his Man City performance. So perhaps Kulusevski goes back out wide right and Johnson goes back to the bench, even though he scored in the week. So I don't know. You wouldn't be surprised either way if Johnson still kept his place, and deservedly so. And maybe he goes with Kulusevski and Maddison and goes full Ange again. I don't know. We'll see. But then I imagine Solanke and Son up top and wide left. So Yeah, we'll do. I'm going to be at the game on Sunday. Going to do a post match after that, and let's see where Spurs are at in this amazing sort of topsy turvy season, which is pretty tiring at the moment. Generally, with the amount of travel and the amount of games at the moment, not that I'm sure we'll be getting the small violin out to over that kind of self pity from this very fortunate job that I've got. But you just never know with Spurs, do you? At the moment, it will be entertaining. It will be interesting. It will be fascinating. Let's see what happens.